Micah Bell is one of the most divisive figures in Red Dead Redemption 2, and for good reason. He's not just a brute outlaw, but a deeply manipulative and corrupting force in the Linde Gang. From his backstory, we learn his criminal roots go deep. His father and grandfather were outlaws, and his dad was wanted for murder in multiple counties. He first enters the gang by saving Dutch in a bar fight gone sour, which earns him a foothold. Once inside, Micah pushes for riskier, more violent schemes. Most notably the disastrous Blackwater ferry robbery, something he convinces Dutch to back. That failure drives the gang into hiding and sets off a chain of events that really destabilizes Dutch's leadership. Over time, Micah increasingly influences Dutch's decisions, steering him toward more arrogance and reckless violence, like blowing up Bacchus Bridge to distract the authorities. Micah's relationship with the rest of the gang is deeply toxic. Arthur and others openly distrust him. He sneers at Arthur's tuberculosis, mocking him as Black Lung. And Micah's jealousy is palpable. He's unpredictable, sadistic even, and has no qualms about violence. According to lore, he's even aligned with the Pinkertons. After returning from Guarma, he becomes an informant, betraying his own gang. By the later chapters, Micah's manipulation pays off. He convinces Dutch to shun rescuing Abigail when she's kidnapped, arguing it's not worth the risk. This fractures the gang fundamentally. When Arthur exposes Micah's betrayal in front of the gang, a dramatic split forms. Micah doubles down, taking a faction with him. In the final mission, American Venom, Micah's treachery culminates. No matter how things play out for Arthur, Micah survives the last showdown, only to be killed by John Marston later on. But his story doesn't end there. After the Linde Gang breaks apart, Micah forms his own gang around 1907, based in Mount Hagen, Ambarino. His new gang is brutal. There's talk of mass murders, dismemberment, and ruthless raids. He becomes a symbol of pure lawlessness, a man shaped by betrayal and survival above all. What makes Micah such a compelling villain is how layered he is. He's not just violent, he's strategic, charming to Dutch, dangerous to Arthur, and utterly self-serving. While his actions ultimately destroy the gang, he's also a catalyst. His influence pulls Dutch away from his ideals and accelerates the downfall. In the end, Micah isn't just a traitor. He's the embodiment of what the Linde Gang becomes when it abandons its founding principles. One of the most fascinating aspects of Micah is how he represents the darker side of loyalty and ambition. Unlike Arthur, whose choices are guided by honor and morality, even in a criminal life, Micah is ruthless and opportunistic, always putting himself first. His charisma and cunning allow him to manipulate Dutch, playing on Dutch's ego and desire for control, which slowly turns the gang from a family into a powder keg of tension. Let's dive into a fresh angle commentary on Micah Bell from Red Dead Redemption 2. Not just as the gang traitor, but as the ideological wrecking ball of the Linde Gang, how he represents a thematic pivot in the game, and why his corrupting influence is so central to the story's decline. When Micah first appears, he presents himself as a capable outsider who's earned a place in the Linde Gang by saving Dutch von der Linde in a bar fight in Crenshaw Hills. That origin story already tells us something. He literally forces his entry through violence and opportunism, and Dutch rewards that over more considerate traits. From there, Micah begins to pull the gang toward ever riskier maneuvers. He's the driving force behind the ill-fated ferry robbery at Blackwater. That job goes badly, forcing the gang out of the West and starts a spiral of decline. What's fascinating is how Micah embodies the survival of the fittest, cynical worldview. One member of the fandom put it simply, he's a manipulative and cunning character, using his wit and charm to sway the opinions and actions of the gang. He doesn't believe in the moral code that others in the gang cling to. Instead, he sees life as a hostile game where loyalty only goes as far as survival. According to his wiki entry, "Sympathy is for the weak" is a direct quote of his philosophy. As the story progresses, Micah's role shifts. He grows from a violent foot soldier into Dutch's confidant and counselor. He encourages Dutch toward ever more extremist actions, blowing up Bacchus Bridge to distract the government, getting the gang to ignore pleas to rescue Abigail when she's captured, and generally destabilizing Dutch's original ideal of a free life outside the system. In this way, Micah is a corrupting agent. He doesn't just betray the gang, he changes it from the inside. Why is he so effective at that? First, because he flatters Dutch's ego. Dutch is increasingly disillusioned, his ideals slipping as the gang's fortunes decline. Micah uses that prey state to push Dutch into risk and cruelty. Second, Micah actively undermines the others. He mocks Arthur's tuberculosis, black lung. He bullies weaker gang members, and he sows mistrust between Arthur and Dutch. That dynamic gives the player a tangible sense of tension and rot inside the gang's relationships. Micah's betrayal is multifaceted. He's working as an informant for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, feeding information, all while wearing the mask of loyalty. And, crucially, he kills or tries to kill Arthur if the player's honor is low, evidencing that his treachery is active, not just philosophical. From a thematic perspective, Micah is a foil to Arthur. Where Arthur Morgan gradually reflects on his life, his loyalty, his mortality, especially after his tuberculosis diagnosis, Micah doesn't care for introspection. Arthur is defined by regret and hope, however slim. Micah is defined by ruthlessness and self-interest. That contrast sharpens the tragedy of the game. The moral path Arthur treads is undone by Micah's nihilism. There's also an aesthetic choice. Micah often wears a white hat, a Western trope usually reserved for protagonists. But here it's subverted. It signals how the game flips expectations. The good guy's hat belongs to the bad guy, hinting that things are off-kilter. The dynamic between Arthur Morgan, John Marston, and Micah Bell is one of the most compelling aspects of Red Dead Redemption 2, highlighting the complexities of loyalty, morality, and the unraveling of the Linde Gang. Each of these three characters represents a different philosophy and approach to life as outlaws, which leads to tension, conflict, and eventual tragedy. Arthur is loyal yet morally reflective. John is determined and pragmatic, and Micah is selfish, manipulative, and increasingly dangerous. Examining their interactions provides deep insight into the narrative and the psychological underpinnings of Rockstar's storytelling. From the beginning, Arthur's role as Dutch's enforcer and the gang's second-in-command positions him as a stabilizing force, often mediating between John and Micah. John, having returned to the gang after previous estrangement, is pragmatic and increasingly focused on family and survival, rather than the gang's grandiose ideals. Micah, in contrast, thrives on chaos and manipulation, sowing discord among the members. Early missions reveal these dynamics subtly. Arthur notices Micah's arrogance and tendency to provoke, while John's cautious nature and desire to avoid unnecessary violence contrast sharply with Micah's recklessness. These differences are the seeds of later conflict, showing how Rockstar layers character development through both dialogue and mission design. A pivotal moment illustrating their complex relationships occurs during heist missions and gang confrontations. Micah's interference often escalates violence unnecessarily, putting both Arthur and John at risk. For example, in the Valentine missions and the St. Denis bank robbery, Micah's arrogance and lack of foresight clash with Arthur's calculated approach and John's practical thinking. Arthur frequently acts as the intermediary, attempting to prevent Micah from pushing situations into chaos while still maintaining the gang's cohesion. This balancing act highlights Arthur's leadership qualities and moral awareness, contrasting with Micah's selfishness. John, meanwhile, serves as a mirror for Arthur. He embodies what Arthur could become if he loses his moral compass entirely, or chooses self-preservation over loyalty. The tension escalates further as Dutch's idealism begins to collapse under pressure from law enforcement, rival gangs, and internal betrayal. Micah exploits this instability, ingratiating himself with Dutch while subtly undermining Arthur and John. This manipulation culminates in the train heist and subsequent desertion scenarios, where Arthur begins to fully recognize Micah's threat to the gang's survival. Here, Rockstar emphasizes moral ambiguity. Arthur's choices and dialogue options allow players to witness his frustration, disillusionment, and strategic thinking in navigating the growing chaos. John, by this point, increasingly prioritizes his family and personal survival, signaling a divergence in the characters' paths. A particularly significant sequence occurs near the gang's collapse in the mountains and at Beaver Hollow. Micah's betrayal becomes undeniable, and Arthur must confront the reality that Dutch has been swayed by Micah's manipulation. Arthur's attempts to reconcile Dutch's original ideals with Micah's influence illustrate the tragic unraveling of the gang, where loyalty, morality, and friendship are tested against greed, ambition, and self-interest. Arthur's interactions with John in these moments are poignant. He attempts to protect John, provide guidance, and warn him about Micah, showing his deep sense of responsibility and evolving morality. John's responses underscore his resilience and growing independence from Dutch's deteriorating leadership. Throughout the game, the Arthur-John-Micah triangle serves as a microcosm of Red Dead Redemption 2's broader themes: the inevitability of change, the consequences of choices, and the moral ambiguity of survival in a world where lawlessness and order constantly collide. Micah embodies the destructive influence of unchecked ambition and immorality. Arthur represents the moral conscience and reflective loyalty, and John symbolizes pragmatic endurance and the hope for redemption beyond the gang's influence. This interplay creates tension-filled missions, rich dialogue, and emotionally impactful narrative arcs, leaving players with lasting impressions of friendship, betrayal, and tragedy. The climax of this dynamic occurs in the final confrontations at Beaver Hollow and the epilogue. Arthur's confrontation with Micah, whether in the canonical ending or the variations influenced by player choices, serves as the culmination of months of tension and betrayal. It's a powerful narrative moment, where Arthur's honor, foresight, and morality are pitted directly against Micah's selfishness and cruelty. John's presence underscores the generational shift. He survives to carry the gang's legacy forward, tempered by Arthur's guidance and Micah's warning of the perils of corruption. This resolution not only defines the fate of the characters, but also solidifies the game's central exploration of loyalty, consequence, and the cost of a life outside the law. In conclusion, the interactions between Arthur, John, and Micah are a masterclass in character-driven storytelling. Rockstar carefully constructs each character's personality. From the moment Micah Bell rides into Arthur Morgan's life, something feels off, and Arthur knows it long before anyone else admits it. Their relationship isn't built on brotherhood or shared belief the way Arthur's bond with Dutch or Hosea is. Instead, it's built on tension, suspicion, and a constant power struggle. Micah represents everything Arthur quietly fears the gang is becoming, and that's why their dynamic is so important to Red Dead Redemption 2's story. Arthur first meets Micah during the disastrous Blackwater aftermath, when the gang is already desperate and fractured. Micah is loud, reckless, cruel, and obsessed with violence for its own sake. Arthur, despite being an outlaw, still operates on a personal code. He believes in loyalty, protecting the gang, and only using violence when necessary. Micah mocks that restraint constantly. He calls Arthur soft, questions his loyalty, and tries to provoke him at every opportunity. This isn't accidental. Micah immediately sees Arthur as an obstacle between himself and Dutch. Throughout the early chapters, Micah repeatedly puts the gang at risk. In Strawberry, he turns a simple jailbreak into a full-scale massacre, killing lawmen and civilians alike. Arthur is visibly disturbed by this, and he openly criticizes Micah for it. What makes this moment important is that Dutch sides with Micah, brushing off Arthur's concerns. That's the first real crack in Arthur's trust, and Micah knows exactly what he's doing. Every reckless act is a test to see how far Dutch can be pushed, and every time Dutch defends Micah, Arthur loses ground. As the story progresses, Micah becomes more openly antagonistic toward Arthur. He constantly whispers in Dutch's ear, framing Arthur as disloyal, questioning his motives, and suggesting that anyone who doubts Dutch is a traitor. Arthur, meanwhile, grows more introspective, especially after his tuberculosis diagnosis. As Arthur starts to reflect on his life and the damage he's caused, Micah doubles down on chaos. Where Arthur seeks meaning and redemption, Micah seeks survival at any cost. One of the most telling differences between them is how they treat the gang. Arthur genuinely cares about the women, the younger members, and the people caught in the gang's wake. Micah treats everyone as disposable tools. He openly expresses racist and misogynistic views, belittles the gang members, and shows zero remorse for innocent deaths. Arthur sees this clearly, and by chapter 5 and 6, he's no longer hiding his hatred for Micah. Their conversations are openly hostile, filled with threats and barely restrained violence. By the time the gang returns from Guarma, Micah's influence is undeniable. Hosea is gone, the moral backbone of the group is shattered, and Dutch is paranoid and unstable. Micah thrives in this environment. Arthur repeatedly warns Dutch that Micah can't be trusted, pointing out his behavior and his convenient survival whenever things go wrong. Arthur is right, of course. Micah has been working as an informant for the Pinkertons, feeding them information to save himself. This betrayal is the ultimate confirmation of everything Arthur feared. The final confrontation between Arthur and Micah isn't just about betrayal. It's about two opposite philosophies colliding.
Micah Bell is one of the most despised characters in Red Dead Redemption 2, but his story isn't just about being the villain. It's about how corruption, manipulation, and ambition can rot a man from the inside out. From the moment he joins the Linde Gang, Micah's presence marks the beginning of its end. He's not just another outlaw looking for a score. He's a parasite who feeds on chaos, using charm and cunning to twist Dutch's ideals into something darker. Micah's background tells you everything you need to know about who he is. Before the events of Red Dead Redemption 2, he was already a wanted criminal, a cold-blooded killer and thief with no loyalty to anyone but himself. He had been part of other gangs before Dutch's, and every time, the story ended the same way: betrayal, death, and Micah walking away richer. When Dutch meets him in 1898 and brings him into the fold, it's one of Dutch's biggest mistakes. What Dutch sees as fire and passion is really selfishness and cruelty disguised as confidence. Micah quickly climbs the ranks of the gang because he knows exactly how to manipulate Dutch. He flatters him, feeds his ego, and tells him what he wants to hear. When others start questioning Dutch's decisions, Arthur, Hosea, even John, Micah becomes the voice whispering in Dutch's ear, pushing him further into paranoia and violence. He plays Dutch like a fiddle, convincing him that loyalty is about obedience, not morality. And the moment Dutch begins to doubt his oldest friends, Micah wins. What makes Micah so dangerous is his complete lack of empathy. He doesn't care about anyone in the gang. Not Arthur, not Sadie, not even Dutch. He sees everyone as a tool. During the St. Denis heist, when everything falls apart, Micah's first instinct isn't to save anyone. It's to protect himself. Later, when the gang hides in Beaver Hollow, he fuels Dutch's worst instincts, telling him that betrayal is everywhere, that everyone's against him. Micah thrives in that tension. He wants chaos, because in chaos, he can control people. By the end of the game, it's revealed that Micah has been an informant for the Pinkertons, feeding them information about the gang's movements. It's the ultimate betrayal, and it's perfectly in line with who he is. Micah never cared about the gang. He was only ever interested in money and survival. He betrays the people who took him in, who trusted him, just like he's done before. And when Arthur confronts him on Mount Hagen, it's more than just revenge. It's justice for everything Micah's done to destroy what little good the gang had left. Micah's final moments are a fitting end for someone who lived only for himself. After Dutch's disappearance, he tries to rebuild a new gang and hoards the Linde's money for himself. But he can't outrun his past. When John and Sadie finally track him down years later, he's still the same: arrogant, hateful, and cruel.